Happy Tuesday out there, Team 42. It's your skipper here, Darius to present our macro minute for Tuesday, February 4th, 2025. As always, we'll start with the executive summary from today's leadoff morning note. If you would like to review the analysis supporting these conclusions, as well as what specific changes you need to make in your portfolio to remain on the right side of market risk, you need to be a client of 42 Macro. So today's key macro question is, are tariffs primarily a negotiating tactic after all? Our answers are unlikely. We reiterate our view that tariffs will be used as revenue offsets to extend and expand the Tax Cuts and Jobs Acts, the individual income tax provisions of which expire at the end of this year if Congress fails to act. DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, their expenditure reductions will be used as offsets as well to limit the impact upon deficit from cutting taxes further. President Trump delayed the implementation of blanket 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada that were intended to go into effect at 12 a.m. today by 30 days. President Trump has yet to delay the implementation of blanket 10% tariffs on China, which has responded with countermeasures. All told, we do not believe tariffs are a mere negotiating tactic. Investors should, however, anticipate more successful negotiations, and for some of those negotiations to end in more weak trade deals that achieve very little in support of reshoring manufacturing jobs or reducing U.S. trade deficits. President Trump is unlikely to pass up any opportunity to claim victory, however shallow and largely symbolic, such as the USMCA and the Phase 1 China trade deal, which he negotiated during his first term, which obviously didn't work, otherwise we wouldn't be here. So, and as long as markets view tariffs as primarily a negotiating tactic, the US dollar can remain range-bound. Refer to our February 3rd leadoff morning note for details on why that is critical for asset markets broadly. Transitioning to our 42 macro dashboard here. As always, we'll wrap up the question from our community. This one's regarding Trump tariffs. It says, had you learned some new things about tariffs from a recent Outlook podcast with Paul Donovan, who's the chief economist at UBS Global Wealth Management. Quick question. If we can agree that tariffs are one, inflationary, and two, bad for growth, and three, bad for asset markets via a stronger dollar, then why are we implementing this policy? Can someone steel man the argument in favor of tariffs? What are we trying to achieve politically? I don't understand the rationale. So excellent question. I think we can all agree that tariffs are a one-off price level change in the direction of higher prices that may occur over a transitory period of time. It's obviously not every company and every industry is going to raise prices commensurately with the tariff on the day the tariffs are announced. There will be a process for assessing the impact on supply chains, et cetera, that may ultimately wind up spreading out the impact of a tariff hike over time. So we understand that tariffs are inflationary. We understand that they are typically bad for growth because ultimately what happens is the increase in prices reduces demand or forces consumers and other businesses who are relying on these supply chains to, kind of source goods. And that process is just creating friction. So ultimately you wind up with lower productivity on the enterprise side and just less demand on the consumer side. And then obviously we've been talking ad nauseum about the implication that tariffs have on the US dollar and how that is likely to cause a depressing influence over global liquidity, which in a year where we need global liquidity to be expanding, you could have a significant pullback in asset markets as a function of that. So that's where we've been primarily focused on the tariff discussion, because again, the mainstream economists like our friend Paul Donovan here, UBS Global Wealth Management, they're going to be naturally focused on growth and inflation. They tend to do a lot less research on these more kind of advanced, I don't want to say advanced, that's rude, different topics like global liquidity, which I think we're one of the world's experts on. So getting back into the question. Why are we implementing this policy? Could someone steel man the argument in favor of tariffs? What are we trying to achieve politically? So it's pretty clear what Trump's trying to achieve politically. All you have to do is listen to this man talk for the past 4 years at any one of his, I'm guessing hundreds of campaign rallies across the Midwest and the continental United States. He's trying to bring back manufacturing jobs, the jobs that we essentially shipped to places like China, Mexico, Canada, Vietnam, India, all around the world, Africa, et cetera, in terms of, South America. We shipped a lot of our manufacturing jobs under the guise of globalization and how that was likely to, create better outcomes for, society and the global economy at large. And it absolutely did. We had a significant reduction in global poverty as a function of taking jobs from U.S. voters and pushing those jobs to places like China, Vietnam, Mexico, et cetera. So the net benefit of globalization from the perspective of those people is very positive. it wasn't a net benefit, broadly speaking, if you think about this from the perspective of the U.S. consumer, or at least those folks who've been significantly impacted by globalization. So what Trump is trying to do is use tariffs as one of several tools to, kind of kickstart the process of reshoring American manufacturing. Tariffs are not going to be, it's not the only tool. It's not going to be used in isolation. He's also talking about, or part of his agenda is lowering taxes, particularly on the corporate tax side. That would also contribute to incentive. That would be an incentive for corporations to stop offshoring U.S. The U.S. manufacturing jobs, and maybe even start to build plants and invest in new plants here in the U.S. Domestically. Another part of President Trump's agenda, which he doesn't really have any direct control over, is a lower dollar and lower interest rates, which would obviously be both supportive for the U.S. manufacturing sector and U.S. export base. Now, whether or not he's able to produce that is to be determined. Obviously, you're going to have a significant disinflationary impulse to get interest rate down much lower than they currently are, and to get the U.S. dollar much down lower than it currently is. And in our opinion, a significant disinflationary impulse seems unlikely over a medium-term time horizon. What's more likely is that we have a modestly positive inflation impulse over a medium-term time horizon. So again, as I mentioned, President Trump is largely powerless outside of just bullying President or Jay Powell on Truth Social in terms of influencing the dollar and interest rates. And is there anything else in the policy mix? Oh, and deregulation, of course. Deregulation is a sort of, I guess, the third or fourth arrow here. We think about tariffs, tax cuts, lower dollar, lower interest rates. You're also talking about significant deregulation of things like the energy sector, the technology sector for AI, and obviously there's a lot more deregulation to come down the pike from a goods manufacturing sector perspective as well. So when you put all those policies together, you're sort of using tariffs as the kind of the stick to force companies to want to incentivize companies to stop, sort of offshoring manufacturing, and then you use tax cuts and deregulation, and hopefully, according to President Trump and his cabinet, hopefully a weaker dollar, lower interest rates to sort of create the carrot on the other side of that. So this is, if you kind of put it all together, this is how you can sort of potentially wind up with the golden age, as he sort of has touted in his campaign speeches, and recently as well in his inauguration speech. You can create a golden age of U.S. growth, et cetera, et cetera. I think the devil's in the details. The jury's still out on what they are actually going to be able to get done from a tax cut perspective, how much deregulation they can push through the economy without significant blowback politically. How much President Trump can weigh on the dollar and interest rates, and then ultimately what's the size and scope of these tariffs, and who they're going to be implemented. So there's a lot to be determined. I think we're very early in this process. It can feel like analysis paralysis at some point. So I wouldn't recommend making significant changes in your portfolio as a function of this particular sliver of the President Trump policy. You got to take it all into account, and I think the market is doing a decent enough job of digesting it all for now. Although yesterday was kind of a whip around day, and part of the reason why I think it's important for investors not to overreact to the volatile approach that President Trump takes to policymaking, because we're going to be dealing with this for a while. So we'll wrap it up there. Darius Dell here, presenting our macro minute for Tuesday, February 4th, 2025. Best of luck out there today. Catch you back here tomorrow. Cheers.